All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
It's Thursday on the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Mo Kelly. And once again, for Mark Thompson, as the world falls apart around us, we still have a great show for you today. In lieu of that, we're going to have, obviously, David Katz, former federal prosecutor and now defense attorney, who's going to join us at the top of the second hour. And also, we have to talk about what Congressman Benny Thompson had to say about the existence of Antifa, where it can be found, and supposedly how many members. And did you see the anti-immigrant screed, the rant by President Trump? He is ramping up all things negative about anyone who doesn't look like, let's just say, him. And I tried to tell you yesterday that we were on this trajectory off the coast of Venezuela, some sort of armed military conflict. Well, let me just update it. We're here now. We're at that point. I can almost confidently say it may not be a declared war, but we will be at war in some sort of military armed conflict by Christmas, and it will probably fall on the day. Just remember, jets were circling in international waters off the coast of Venezuela. It's like, why would they be out there? Are they looking for drug boats? No, not at all. It's a part of a larger carrier fleet, we now learn, is out there. And did you hear the news? We took someone's oil tanker. Now, I didn't know that there was supposed to be some sort of connection between drugs and oil, but we knew at some point we would get to the oil. We knew that was the only reason that we would be dealing with Venezuela on any level. There had to be an oil variable. And now we're here. And the president, even after taking the oil as if he were some Somali pirate in himself, offered really no explanation as to why. What were the circumstances leading up to it? Any type of supposed connection to drugs, but we know it's connected to oil. In fact, we got a video to tell you all about it. Go ahead, Albert.
We begin tonight with new video of the Trump administration's latest move against Venezuela. Attorney General Pam Bondi put it out this evening, shows American forces boarding an oil tanker coming down lines from hovering choppers, making their way to the bridge and seizing control of the vessel. Quoting from the Attorney General's social media post, today the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Homeland Security Investigations, and the U.S. Coast Guard, with support from the Department of War, executed a seizure warrant for a crude oil tanker used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. A senior U.S. official tells CNN it had Venezuelan crude on board, was sailing in international waters, and no one was injured in the boarding operation. Now, the video came out just a short time after this from the president setting the stage.
As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, a large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so you'll be seeing that later, and you'll be talking about that later with some other people.
He said the tanker was seized, quote, for very good reason. And when asked what would happen to the oil, he replied, we keep it, I guess. Late today, the Venezuelan government called the seizure a, quote, act of international piracy, calling it a, quote, deliberate plan to plunder our energy resources. Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, also weighed in shortly before the president announced the operation.
Our message to the people of the United States remains the same. Peace. Peace above all else. No to crazy war. No to bloodshed for oil. No to war for oil, the recipe for eternal wars.
Well, the administration, as you know, now has a full carrier battle group in the region, along with other warships and air assets. And though the president,
there it is, a full carrier group in the region. For what? For drug boats? For speed boats? No, clearly it's for the oil. And this is the only type of analogy I can think of. And we've all been to elementary school. We all had to deal with a bully or bullies on some level. And I remember when I had to deal with my bully, and my bully was named Chad. I won't give his last name, but he did end up in jail, in prison for murder. So he was a definite bully.
Chad
Yeah.
was a legit bully. Wow.
Legit. But Chad, like other bullies, it was almost like mission creep. First, it was name calling. Then it was other forms of harassment. Then he put his finger on you and poke you and literally prod you. Then he would maybe throw something on you. And then it got to actual violence where he would punch you. This is what is happening right now. You have this intentional escalation goading Venezuela, if not daring Venezuela, to respond on some level. When the missile strikes didn't elicit a response from Venezuela, you saw more of the missile strikes. And now it has been amped up to just outright seizing an oil tanker. Now, we all know if this were done in reverse, that would be considered an act of war. So let's not kid ourselves that this is not also an act of war. This is something which is being done specifically to get a response from the nation state of Venezuela, a sovereign nation. We're not talking about these nameless, faceless drug runners that we never actually see, or the drugs that we never actually see. We now have the Trump administration specifically calling out and goading Nicolas Maduro and also Venezuela, the country. This, in any other capacity, would be an act of war if Venezuela or those Venezuela military were to seize an American oil tanker. We often talk about what would happen if this happened in the Middle East with one of our oil tankers, but we're the ones who's actually doing it off the coast of Venezuela. Now, at some point, either Venezuela is going to respond as an act of self-defense, or we're just going to start with our own missile strikes in their sovereign territory on land. And then we will just force the issue and we'll be in an armed military conflict. But if you look at the trajectory of this escalation and the speed in which it is starting to escalate, I'm not trying to be funny and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but I am cynical, and I kind of seen this before. If you're a student of history, we'll probably be in some armed form of military conflict by Christmas. And I say Christmas because that's a day in which it's easier to rally the emotions of Americans, especially those in MAGA. This is what we're heading towards. No, we're not heading towards it. Kim, we are running to it. We are trying to make this happen.
Do you feel like, I feel like the Americans are missing the why on this? You know, why would we go to war with Venezuela? What's behind this? Why are we blowing up fishing boats, drug boats, so-called now? Why would we escalate like this? What's the real reason? I think Americans are kind of scratching their heads going, what is happening?
I don't know put it this way, reasonable Americans are scratching their head, but no one's asking the question in a media sense. You saw that package with CNN and Anderson Cooper, and you didn't see anyone, as far as in the president's remarks, push back and say, why are we doing this? What is the probable cause? What is the reason behind this? Why was that tanker seized? And then really pushing the administration to show some evidence, to show some sort of reasoning to make these dots connect. Because they couldn't even give us a pretense like, well, the oil tanker was actually a drug boat. They didn't say that. As implausible as it is, it didn't even get to that point where they gave us that flimsy excuse. It's to the point now they're not giving us any explanation. They're not reporting anything to Congress. Remember 2 days ago we were talking about that second strike on that boat. We still haven't seen the video for that. All this is happening in the same space, in the same media cycle, and in the same location in international waters. And no one is pushing. When I say no one, I'm saying no one substantively is pushing back on the administration to get the answers that we need in a timely fashion. And I say timely fashion because with each passing day, we're getting closer and closer to an armed military conflict. How do I know that? Because it was the American military which seized the boat. That makes it an act of war. Our military is involved. And we're going to see more of this until either Venezuela responds or it gets to the point where there's no choice except to call it what it is. And Kim, I thought I was going to have jokes about this, but I don't have any jokes today because it's that serious. And it reminds me of American hegemony around the world that we've seen in decades past, usually connected to oil. If you want to go back to Kuwait, if you want to go back to Iraq, there's always been this oil variable. And once again, we're seeing it. If you're a student of history, you always knew that it was at some point it was going to get to be the oil. I did not expect the president to go about it this way. And I did not expect the president to say with his own lips, yeah, we'll probably just keep the oil. He said it out loud. We'll keep the oil. And also not tell us why they even seized the tanker in the first place. And going back to the bully, if the bully knows that they can put their finger on you or shove you or call you names the first time, they're going to do it again. So what happens? The one military strike on the speedboat, a fishing boat, turns into 2, turns into 4, turns into 8. And the one, or at least the first seizure of this oil tanker is probably going to turn into 2. Why? Because, and you heard from Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, he doesn't want the war for any number of obvious reasons. Regardless of what you think about it, there's no upside for Venezuela getting into an armed military conflict with the United States. And the United States knows that. And that's part of the reason, as the bully in this metaphor, that they're pressing the issue. Now, it could be before Christmas. We're only 2 weeks out. But there's going to be another point of escalation in the next 24 hours. How do I know this? Because we have a carrier fleet there. They're not just going to stay there in perpetuity and do nothing. They are there specifically because there is some strategic reason for that positioning, and most likely it's for some sort of military engagement. It would defy explanation for them to be sitting off the coast of Venezuela, that much firepower just in case. No, they are mobilizing, they're moving, and there's going to be more. Go ahead, Albert.
No, that's a
Yeah, that's it. Yes, go ahead with that.
Was the right move, and if the goal is to further pressure the Maduro regime ahead of possible land strikes, do you think it will work?
No, I don't think it's the right move, and he hasn't adequately explained it. I mean, why did we seize this oil tanker? And threatening war against Venezuela, I think, is a major mistake. I mean, remember, President Trump ran in part saying we've been engaged in all of these forever wars, these conflicts that we've gotten sucked into that have wound up costing Americans far more than we benefited from. And I think there were a lot of people who were sympathetic to that after 20 plus years of various wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. And now he's doing the exact opposite as president. He's expanding the idea of where we should go to war against all drug traffickers, apparently, and now against any country in the Western Hemisphere that he doesn't think is towing the American line. We should not be trying to dominate the Western Hemisphere. This is going to drag us into a conflict that is incredibly costly for the country, and it should be contrary to the values and principles of America. And let's keep in mind, there's no congressional authorization for any of this. He's doing it unilaterally, and I think contrary to the Constitution.
Back.
no.
Yes, all of that is factually accurate. There's no reasoning which has been given. It is in contradiction to the Constitution. but there are no consequences, Kim. And I talk about this every single day. They proceed with impunity because there are no consequences. And like the bully analogy, if there are no consequences, if there's no substantive pushback, there's no reason for the bully to stop. And we, America, are the bullies in this equation. I don't think anyone can honestly or sincerely argue or allege otherwise. We have pressed this issue. We have started this fight, this military aggression. This is no longer just about drone strikes, about these nameless, faceless drug runners. This is talking about a sovereign nation and a private industry connected to that sovereign nation and somehow trying to, let's be honest, disrupt the economy of that sovereign nation by stealing, my word, stealing an oil tanker. It doesn't matter if they give it back in a week or a month, and they probably won't.
They're not giving it back.
Or its contents. And so where do we go from here? What does that mean? And if we went further in that video that Albert was playing, there's also an Iranian connection to that tanker.
I just wanted to say that for people listening on the podcast instead of watching, that was House Armed Services Committee ranking member Adam Smith, who is a Democrat. And as far as the Iranian connection, the United States is imposing sanctions on this tanker because it says it was involved in Iranian oil trading when this vessel was called the Adisa. And so it has been sanctioned. And that's why they waited for it in international water and they were looking for it. Albert has more video, I believe.
Go ahead, Albert. You have it.
President Trump ran in part saying we've been engaged in all of these forever wars, these conflicts that we've gotten sucked into that have wound up costing Americans far more than we benefited from. And I think there were a lot of people who were sympathetic to that after 20 plus years of various wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. And now he's doing the exact opposite as president. He's expanding the idea of where we should go to war against all drug traffickers, apparently, and now against any country in the Western Hemisphere that he doesn't think is towing the American line. We should not be trying to dominate the Western Hemisphere. This is going to drag us into a conflict that is incredibly costly for the country, and it should be contrary to the values and principles of America. And let's keep in mind, there's no congressional authorization for any of this. He's doing it unilaterally, and I think contrary to the Constitution.
Back when he was first running back in 2015, 2016, he talked a lot about taking Iraq's oil, essentially as payment for the war there. Obviously, his plan never saw, fruit on that. Do you think this is about taking oil from Venezuela?
I think this is about something broadly worse than that. And if you read the national security strategy that was released last Thursday, look, we worked very hard over the course of the last 80 years to try to build a world that wasn't just about the most powerful nations, subjugating the less powerful nations. That was the basic principle. After World War I and World War II, we thought having that type of world led to almost the destruction of the planet. Let's move in a different direction. Let's try to set up a rules-based international order.
The reason being, he was basically saying what I was saying as far as there is a historical precedent for what we've done as a nation as it relates to countries which have oil. There's a historical precedent as to what America has done as far as instigating conflicts around the world for our geopolitical benefit. If you've been paying attention to history, then this should not surprise you. But also, if you've been paying attention to history, you know how this story is likely going to end. It's not going to all of a sudden stop where we're going to remove that whole carrier fleet and not have something to show for it, not have some reason to say, well, they were there so they could do X, Y, and Z. So in other words, if let's say you're a gun owner, and what is the common refrain? People say, don't pull out your gun unless you plan to use it. Mm-hmm. We have pulled out our gun metaphorically and literally. And we have every intention of using it in that Venezuelan water area for our financial benefit, our geopolitical benefit, and any other, I should say the political benefit of Donald Trump. And it's a part of this larger doctrine of anti-immigrant, anti-brown people, anti-black people. And that plays well with his base. It's not completely disconnected. It's easier for MAGA to swallow when it's being done under the pretense and pretext of drugs, and it's a brown country. It's easier to sell. We're not doing this off the coast of Norway, okay? We're not having these fake debates about what's going on in Europe in that regard. It's about, or if we do talk about Europe, it's about how the brown people are invading Europe. What I want to talk about now, as I get ready to change gears.
The Mark Thompson Show.
What we're seeing in Venezuela is part of this larger demonization and demagoguery regarding brown and black people. What I'm getting ready to show you is President Trump leaning in to the demonization of brown people specifically, of black people specifically, and how that is a featured component of his rallies now. Again, why a sitting president who supposedly is not up for another term is out there doing rallies, I don't know. But he is out there, and he is using this anti-immigrant rhetoric in a more and more hostile way, which I think is going to emotionally allow and give a permission structure for bad things to happen to brown and black people around the world, be it Somali people here in Minnesota, be it Latino and Hispanic people here in the United States, be it brown people in and around Venezuela, is a common theme. Now, this next clip that Albert is going to play is from ABC News, and you get a broader understanding and sense of what Donald Trump is trying to do right now to I would say, prime the pump for all the bad things which are coming the way of black and brown people. Go ahead, Albert.
Overnight, President Trump in Pennsylvania to tout his economic policies and tackle the #1 issue for voters, the cost of living.
I have no higher priority than making America affordable again. That's what we're going to do.
But the president has also dismissed concerns about affordability, calling the issue a Democrat hoax and a con job.
They use the word affordability, and that's their only word. They say affordability, and everyone says, oh, that must mean Trump has high prices. No, our prices are coming down tremendously from the highest prices in the history of our country.
But the price of groceries actually up from a year ago, including products impacted by the president's tariffs. Coffee up 41%, sirloin steak up 20%, frozen orange juice up 12%. The president standing by his tariffs while saying Americans may have to make some sacrifices.
You don't need $37 for your daughter. 2 or 3 is nice. You don't need $37. So we're doing things right. We're running this country right.
But most polls show voters don't agree. A new Reuters Ipsos poll shows 56% of Americans disapprove of how the president is handling the cost of living. Only 31% approve. The speech last night intended to be laser focused on the economy ahead of the midterms, but Trump repeatedly going off topic.
I haven't read practically anything off the stupid teleprompter.
The president launching into vicious attacks against Somali immigrants, calling them lazy and garbage, and continuing to go after Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, who is a naturalized U.S. citizen. The president rousing the crowd with demands she leave the country. Trump then veering into an anti-immigrant tirade.
We only take people from countries, right? Why can't we have some people from Norway, Sweden, just a few? Let us have a few. From Denmark, do you mind sending us a few people? Send us some nice people, do you mind? But we always take people from Somalia, places that are a disaster, right? Filthy, dirty, disgusting, ridden with crime.
And the White House had said this.
There are a couple things there. There's the serious response as far as, well, why do we not take more people from Sweden, Denmark, Norway, white Europe? The reason is their quality of living is higher than the United States. Higher. The quality of living is indisputably better. So you're not going to have people fleeing the country trying to come to the United States. That's the first point. The second point is, if you were to look into why the quality of living is better in those countries, even though America is truthfully still the richest nation in the world, but the quality of living is inferior to those countries. If you look deeper, you notice that they have what? Say it with me, Kim. Universal health care. They have an emphasis on education. They in many times they have severe limitations on guns. What am I missing here? It's almost like everything that the Democratic Party presently stands for is front and center in those countries. So it says two things. One, no, they're not going to be fleeing the country because they're doing the things which make it a better quality of living. And two, all the things that, or all the people that you don't want coming to this country, you're making it very clear it's not about why they're coming here. It's about that they're coming here. And you want to use Ilhan Omar as I'll say the rhetorical lead of all things black and brown. When I say black and brown, because people may perceive Somali people as just foreigners, but they're specifically African people. And although they may not look like the classic West Africans who are like me, a descendant of, people will still see them as other. They see them as Muslim. They see them as Trump was saying. I can't remember all the invective that he had for it, and talking about they're dirty and criminals, and all this is priming the pump for the bad things that they want to do via ICE and continue to do in this anti-immigrant immigration nation that we are presently. What I want, though, is to people to recognize this in advance before it gets worse, because it's going to get materially worse before the midterms. Now, I can appreciate the rhetoric. I can appreciate the attempts to highlight it like we're highlighting right now, but more is going to have to be done or people are going to be harmed. Like for example, Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi. He's someone that I have long respected and have had a chance to talk with on more than one occasion. I believe that he's sincere in his love of this country and his desire to get it back to where it was in many instances. He was questioning someone about domestic terrorism. He was asking, like, well, if domestic terrorism is the number one issue here, or the number one concern that we should have as far as bad actors, why is it Antifa? How many people are there in Antifa? Can you pick out where the Antifa headquarters is? And again, we're talking about the Trump administration, which is about demonizing others. It's about declaring someone the enemy and then pointing the administration against that enemy. And before the show's over, hopefully we'll have time to get to this newly revealed enemies list by the Trump administration. Go ahead, Kim. Kim, were you?
Oh no, I thought we were gonna see the Benny Thompson video. Yeah.
So, okay. Then I want to get your thoughts on other sides. Let's watch what Benny Thompson had to say.
Yeah.
I'd say the first one, President Trump had just announced executive order to domestic terrorist organization, Antifa. That's our primary concern right now.
All right, that's what President Trump did. What does the FBI say?
We share the same view. When you look at the data right now, you look at the domestic terrorist threat that we're facing right now, What I see from my position is that's the most immediate violent threat that we're facing on the domestic side.
So where is the Antifa headquartered?
What we're doing right now with the organization.
Where in the United States does Antifa exist? If it's a terrorist organization and you've identified it as number one.
We are building out the infrastructure right now.
So what does that mean? We're trying to get the information. You say Antifa is a terrorist organization. Tell us as a committee, how did you come to that? Where do they exist? How many members do they have in the United States as of right now?
Well, that's very fluid. It's ongoing for us to understand that. The same, no different than Al Qaeda and ISIS.
No, I don't want you. I'll ask one question, sir. I just want you to tell us. If you said Antifa is the number one domestic terrorist organization operating in the United States, I just need to know where they are, how many people. I don't want a name. I don't want anything like that. Just how many people have you identified with the FBI that Antifa is made of?
Well, the investigations are active.
Sir, you wouldn't come to this committee and say something you can't prove. I know you wouldn't do that. But you did.
And there you have it. There you have it. They created this boogeyman, Kim, of Antifa. And they want you to believe, not is, but believe it's the number one domestic terrorist threat. And you have who I presume is the interim acting head of the FBI, can't give any specifics or even generalities surrounding the size, scope, location, particular people, or any type of threats that they've identified and thwarted connected to Antifa. Nothing. It would be different if you had some level of information. It's like, yes, we just stopped this proposed and scheduled Antifa attack against the state capitol, or we just arrested 10 members in regard to an ongoing investigation. None of that. It's just all generalities about this idea of Antifa. And it's the number one domestic threat, more so than any other organization in the country.
You'd think if that was the case, Mo, they'd know a lot more about it.
You would think. But just like Benny Thompson was saying, like, we can't get any information. No specifics. Now, Thompson went one step further and suggested that there were lies being told. I just think that there was no information to offer. There was really nothing to say. Right. If you want to know anything about Antifa, well, there was nothing to offer. You can't tell you, just give us an approximation. Are we talking about 10 people? Are we talking about 10,000 people? Are we talking about 200 people? Are we talking about, is there any type of international connection? Nothing. Is it something that you stopped some sort of operation in Seattle, Washington and Washington, D.C., and they were communicating about a proposed attack on something? Absolutely nothing. But we're supposed to walk away fearing Antifa, which we can't identify, we can't see. I mean, it's like, how can we stop something if we can't even identify it? It's different if you could say Al Qaeda has about 25, 30,000 members. I'm saying these are general pieces of information that we can look up and can find. We know that they have bases in this portion of the world, in this region, in this country, and in this city. Can't get any of that. I know right now I can look it up and find where supposed sleeper cells are, according to the FBI, for a lot of these terrorist organizations. That information is publicly available, except for Antifa.
I love how Benny Thompson used a tactic that I use as a parent all the time. If someone says something sassy or flippant to me, I'll look at said child and say, I know you didn't just say that to me. Like, you can't possibly say that to your mother, right? You didn't mean that. You might want to backtrack and rethink and reframe what you just said, because you couldn't possibly have said that to me, right? That's exactly what he said. You can't possibly come to the house offering zero information. You can't possibly have come here without anything to back up what you're saying, right? Yeah.
Something else that I liked is a rhetorical tool that I use in discussions with people. I won't say my wife, but it includes my wife, where I don't need to give answers. I just ask questions, and the questions themselves highlight the answers. And that's what Biddy Thompson was doing. You know,
I'm sure your wife loves that. It's probably infuriating.
yeah, he knows that there's going to be no answer as to how many Antifa, or where is Antifa, or what are their capabilities, for example. What might they be up to? He's just asking the questions that he knows there will be no answer to. Now, I didn't need absolute specifics. I think it's fair to not know the exact numbers, the exact location. Is fair. You know what? I would have accepted if he said in response to Benny Thompson, some of this information is classified and it should be behind closed doors. I would feel better if we went into a closed door session. Couldn't even get that. Couldn't get that. There was no publicly facing information. And Albert, I want you to play it again so we can re-highlight the things we've been talking about, how the line of questioning, very effective. And it highlighted how ill-prepared and unprepared the FBI was in a public briefing before Congress, an intelligence briefing. Check it out one more time.
I'd say the first one, President Trump had just announced executive order to domestic terrorist organization, Antifa. That's our primary concern right now.
All right, that's what President Trump did. What did the FBI say?
We share the same view. When you look at the data right now, you look at the domestic terrorist threat that we're facing right now, what I see from my position is that's the most immediate violent threat that we're facing on the domestic side.
So where is Antifa headquartered?
What we're doing right now with the organization.
Where in the United States does Antifa exist? Yeah. If it's a terrorist organization and you've identified it as number one.
We are building out the infrastructure right now.
So what does that mean? We're trying to get the information. You say Antifa is a terrorist organization. Tell us as a committee, how did you come to that? Where do they exist? How many members do they have in the United States as of right now?
Well, that's very fluid. It's ongoing for us to understand that. The same, no different than Al Qaeda and ISIS.
No, I don't want you. I'll ask one question, sir. I just want you to tell us. If you said Antifa is the number one domestic terrorist organization operating in the United States, I just need to know where they are, how many people. I don't want a name. I don't want anything like that. Just how many people have you identified with the FBI that Antifa is made of?
Ballpark guess, dude. Ballpark. Couldn't even get it.
Because they're making Antifa some kind of boogeyman phantom, enemy that we're supposed to be afraid of, but we don't know who they are, where they are, what's happening. It seems like a scapegoat for them to blame things on when we don't really know much about Antifa other than the name is supposed to be scary to us.
And if you don't define Antifa, if you don't give any type of parameters as far as location, demographics, specifics of the ideology, acts which have been conducted in the name of Antifa, it allows, and this is intentional, it allows those who want to point the fingers at Antifa. It can be anyone, it could be everyone, it could be no one. It is very convenient, and it is very specific and intentional to allow people in MAGA specifically, because remember, in that clip, it started with what President Trump believed and said and did through his executive action. There was no evidence or data underlying that. That was something that Donald Trump did all by himself on his own without anything undergirding it. as far as evidence. And what I did appreciate was Congressman Thompson saying, hey, I don't want to hear what President Trump had to say. I'm asking you as the FBI, the enforcement mechanism when it comes to domestic terrorism. What do you know about this organization? Where is it found? How many people? What might they be up to? How are they number one as opposed to not number 15? You know, why is this particular group the focus of the FBI in its counterterrorism activities? Couldn't get any answers. And if you can't give me generalities, then I'm assuming that you don't have any specifics either, because those were softball questions. Those are really easy questions. Yeah. And again, I would have been okay with, hey, there's some information we cannot divulge in this public setting. I would encourage we go into a closed door briefing. Now, whether that would have been a lie or not, I don't know, but that would have been a reasonable response. But to come empty handed, and you know, these are the questions or the subjects that are going to be covered in this congressional hearing, I don't get it. And what I mean by I don't get it is I don't get how that is allowed to happen. I don't get how we got to the point where a congressional hearing has absolutely no value other than a televised moment where people get to use and cut up as a clip and use on the Mark Thompson show or elsewhere. Because at this point, there are no, here it is again, there are no consequences to what you say. Now, we had some Kristi Noem testimony in that same hearing where we know that she was not answering the question. We know that she was lying under oath, but there are no consequences. I mean, she could have just not shown up, as a lot of people have defied subpoenas and invitations to testify before Congress. Doesn't mean anything. So if you know that going in, then it's okay to show up ill-prepared. It's okay to show up without answering questions. It's okay to show up and knowingly mislead Congress. Because why? There are no consequences.
We've got this great super chat from Wes, who says, Antifa, what about the furries, Mo? They're up to unspeakable things. Thank you, Wes, for the contribution.
Bronies? Do you know about the bronies?
Yes, I do know about the bronies. Those are the people that are some type of sexually stimulated by My Little Ponies.
Well, they will allege that it's not sexually connected.
Oh, okay.
And I mention that because there are some unconfirmed reports that the alleged pipe bomber is a brony.
Oh.
So that's why I'm connecting those dots.
Sure.
So there's evidence of other groups and activities, but we can't get any answers or any evidence of Antifa, this nameless, faceless, amorphous organization responsible for so much terrorism, but we can't tell you specifically or give you any specifics about the organization, its infrastructure, its location, its members, its plans, its their communication techniques. Tell me something. I mean, how are they communicating on the internet? Are they using phone? Are they using burners? I mean, what is it? Nothing? Absolutely nothing? Lucy McAllister, 1877. Thank you for your $20 super sticker. Mm-hmm. And I got to remind you, thank you for liking the Mark Thompson Show. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing the Mark Thompson Show. Because of you and your collective actions, this is why we can do what we do. This is why that Kim can be here, Albert can be here, I can be here, Mark is here on a daily basis. Thank you so very much. Go ahead, Kim.
Vilma with 5 says, agrees with your former statement about Trump being a bully with money and power. That, she says, is why he's so dangerous.
He is the classic bully. The way he speaks to reporters, especially female reporters, that's a bully mentality. And let me put it this way. When you work in this business, you're going to get hate. You're going to get hate mail. You're going to get not nice notes. You're going to get insults. Sometimes you even get death threats. And you usually get it from people who wouldn't dare either say it in your face, or if they do say it, they know that they are in a position where there are no consequences. You can't do anything in return. The reason why President Trump talks to reporters like that is because he knows, and the administration knows, that the outlet is not going to back him up. The outlet is not going to protect them. And they know that the outlet wants to have access to the president and these briefings, these gaggles, these press gaggles. And the only way they can continue to keep that press pass is to accept the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it were Donald Trump, just the dude out on the street talking to like Rachel Scott like that, it would be a very different response. Rachel Scott would have told him where to go, where to get on and get off, and talked about his dead mama too. But since she's representing ABC, and that goes back to the whole Jimmy Kimmel and FCC and all of that, she's going to be measured in her response, if at all, even though he is openly and repeatedly, consistently insulting her network. And he can do it and will continue to do it because why? ABC cares more about having a microphone in the room, and the abuse that Rachel Scott takes and others take is of zero consequence to them as long as they can stay in the room.
Randy, back to Noam, says one of the Democrats threatened Noam with perjury when she refused to give a decent answer on who approved the asylum request of the guy who shot the 2 National Guard people. Yeah, she wouldn't answer that.
She didn't, yeah. And she was threatened with something that's not going to happen. You know, you can threaten someone with perjury, but what does it mean if it never happens? You know, what does it mean? Like, for example, you can have someone like a Brett Kavanaugh or Samuel Alito. They can testify during their SCOTUS hearings that no, they're not going to do anything with Roe v. Wade and abortion law. It's settled law. And then they turn around and in the first opportunity they get, they overturn it. There are no consequences to lying to Congress. So why not lie to Congress repeatedly? The only way we get back to where we were is if there are actual consequences for what people do in the here and now. And I had this conversation, obviously, with John Rothman and others, and I'll have it with David Katz in just a moment, about whether we are still living in a time in which there are co-equal branches of government. Because at this point, if I'm President Trump, I'm doing whatever the hell I want because I know my own party is not trying to stop me. I know that the Democrats can't stop me.
Yep.
I know that the media can't stop me. If only because if you've been paying attention to the mergers, they basically locked down a lot of these networks thanks to the mergers. We don't know what's going to happen with CNN with the whole Warner Brothers Discovery merger, but that's an example. We have seen what has happened with CBS because of the Paramount Skydance merger and the inclusion of Barry Weiss as editor-in-chief. Barry Weiss, are you serious? No, we're not serious. But media has found out that there is a limitation as far as what they can say and what they do, lest they are sued by the Trump administration and the network will roll over, or there are other actual consequences in terms of like the FCC, where most of these media outlets are just going to soft shoe and go and tread very lightly around the president because they are worried about there actually being consequences for them, not for the president, for them. So until we get to the point where people know that there's some sort of consequence coming for the president for lying or anyone in the Trump administration for lying, we're going to have more of this. We're going to have more of these congressional hearings in which those who are being deposed will lie. They will not answer the question. They will filibuster, or they will just say F it and not even show up at all, because what would happen otherwise? Absolutely nothing.
And it's not just consequences. We all just kind of shrug our shoulders and go, here they go again. Like it's expected and like it's somehow condoned.
It actually is. And many times whoever is testifying is performing for that audience of one, the president, and knows that he spends an inordinate amount of time watching his people on Capitol Hill and watching news coverage of his people on Capitol Hill. And they know if they fight back and push back and deflect and distract, lie, the person who will be most appreciative of that and supportive of it will be the president himself. So, of course, you're going to see more of it. Absolutely. Kim, we have a lot of folks we need to shout out right now who have been helping keep this show going, who have been liking and subscribing and donating.
Luis comes in with 5, says 2 Mo days. Actually, we get more than 2. We get 4 this week. Always enjoy when you guest host. Love your insights on the serious stuff. But, says Luis, miss your sports, astrology, and movie takes. Go Rams. Thanks again. Thanks, Luis.
Not wrong.
Luis also has this to say with another 5. Trump is a classic punk bully that would run like a rabbit if faced with physical retaliation. Remember, he was hiding in a bunker during the DC protests.
Can I jump in there on that one?
Please.
Kim? And there's some truth to that. I wouldn't use the word punk, but I would say the people who have never been in an actual fight in their life usually have the most to say about being tough. The people who have actually been in fights usually try to avoid fights because they know, for the most part, only bad things happen. People know that if you get into a fight, if you've been in a fight, that you could win, but you get hurt. You could lose and get hurt. You could win, get hurt, and get sued. You could win, get hurt, get sued, and get arrested. So there are far too many things which could happen in an actual fight for you to go headlong into any type of physical confrontation. And the people who've actually been in fights know that, and know that 99 times out of 100, it's better to just walk away. And the people who are doing all this, talking about how tough they are, the guy who's doing the most talking, I promise you, he has never been in a physical confrontation in his life. For all the talk about how he would beat Joe Biden in the fight, which is silly in of itself that he even talks that way, he has never been in a fight. I don't think he's ever driven a car in his life. I don't think he's ever purchased a gallon of milk in his life. I don't think he's actually been faithful to any of his wives in his life. I don't think he's ever done anything which is consistent with holding up the mantle of being a man. For all the bluster, for all the machinations about what a man needs to do in the country right now, or what is an alpha male, he is as far away from that as you can possibly be. He has no respect for women, which says to me, you're not a man. He has no idea what it's like. And I haven't served, so I'm not even going to claim this for me. He has no idea what it's like for people to believe in something bigger than him or herself and risk everything and signing up to protect this country. He has no idea. He doesn't even have the capability of offering the respect for people who do. To me, anyone like that cannot claim that he is a man. And he is a bully in the classic sense. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, he will go step by step. Starts with first a nasty tweet or a post on Truth Social, and then it comes out in a press gaggle in which that person. Sorry about my dogs; they're going crazy. It'll come out in a press gaggle where that person is not even there. And they can't even defend themselves. Ilhan Omar can't even defend herself. That is a bully.
Michelle says, there is no wisdom in repeating history and expecting better. Why do we do it? The emperor is the perfect example of this point. You're talking about, the going to war for oil, I think is when she wrote that. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate the 5 and appreciate the comment as well. Mike Man 24 with a 5. Thank you for that. Says the Dawn is offering a free Caribbean cruise for his rich friends. The only catch is It's on an oil tanker. Gotta go. And then Delamater comes in with a couple, says, "Good morning, my merry remarkables. Ho-hos. Yes, ho-hos to you." Thank you, Richard. Thanks to everyone for contributing. We appreciate that very much. It is the way the show survives. As Mo said, you can find more details about Patreon and PayPal support at themarkthompsonshow.com. And thank you to everyone for the super chats and super stickers. We'll read some more as the show continues.
A quick question. What can they get at Mark's merch?
Oh, they get some good things at Mark's merch. Great little Christmas presents, little things coming up there. Getmarkmerch.com. That's the website. And you've got everything from hoodies to sweatshirts and t-shirts and resistance shirts. I mean, if you wanted to end up, Mo, on the new, terrorism watch list where they point at anyone who disagrees, I love these shirts. Peacefully resist. Love that. Love the font that Courtney used to design it. Really pretty. And people have asked for the long sleeves and delivered. We've got the long sleeve shirts for people for winter that are going out and doing their protests, which I understand there's protests going on as we speak in Washington, D.C. So hopefully we've got some of the Mark's merch on display there. Coffee mugs, shirts, it's all at getmarkmerch.com. And, it's a way to go out in the world and tell people about the show and show your support for the show as well. Got hats, got a little wine cup. People love the socks. They got a little cooking apron, for your grilling needs, little wrapping paper there. That's getmarkmerch.com. Look at the jammies. Love it. Tote bags, weekend duffel bag.
And today's to do it. Today is the day to do it because we're 2 weeks out from Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you celebrate Christmas or not, these are great gifts. Maybe you have a friend who has a birthday coming up, or you just want to set someone up for the new year, get them off to a great start. These are great gifts for them. So go to getmarkmerch.com. Kim, we didn't do the news yesterday. We got to do some news.
I know. You're becoming like Mark. You're just skipping things right and left. I don't know. Yeah, I'm happy to do some news if you want to do that before David Katz arrives.
Yeah, let's do that if we can. It doesn't have to be long.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the oil tanker seized by the United States off the coast of Venezuela was used to transport sanctioned oil to Iran. In a post on X, Bondi said the ship had been sanctioned for years over its alleged involvement in an oil shipping network supporting terrorist groups. The move comes as tensions have escalated between President Trump and Venezuelan President Maduro. The Trump administration is threatening to sanction the International Criminal Court unless it pledges not to prosecute the president. An administration official said on Wednesday they are concerned that the ICC will turn its attention to the president and others and pursue prosecutions against them. The official didn't say if the concern was over the recent U.S. military strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. The administration is also demanding the International Criminal Court drop its investigation of Israeli leaders over the Gaza war and formally end its probe of U.S. troops committing possible war crimes in Afghanistan. Things got a little testy. In a House hearing on global threats to the United States featuring Homeland Chief Kristi Noem, she faced intense pushback from Democrats over President Trump's illegal immigration crackdown in U.S. cities, specifically the continued use of National Guard troops and ICE officers in so-called blue cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, and elsewhere. The Senate has failed to pass both the GOP and the Democratic health care bills as the Obamacare countdown clock winds down. The Affordable Care Act subsidies expire at the end of the year, and if it happens, about 22 million Americans will see a spike in their premiums, and a big spike at that. GOP House leaders are working on a health care package. The White House says President Trump will roll out a new approach on health care, quote, very soon. I think we're still in the concepts of a plan phase there. I don't know. I don't see any there.
I don't think we're in that concepts yet.
You don't think we're at concept? I thought the concept was give people $2,000 and we don't know what we're supposed to do with it exactly.
There's no framework. There's actually nothing outlining what they're going to do. They're promising these various checks for this, that, and the other reason, which we'll never likely receive. Or the people, if they do receive them, will be such a small segment of society that it will not make any impact, even though all of us have healthcare needs and concerns. If people keep falling for the okie doke. And I don't know what to say. If you think that $2,000 check is either going to change your life or offset your healthcare premiums, then you're not very bright. That's all I can say. I know that's mean, but it's true.
Well, it is what it is. President Trump is continuing to pressure Indiana state lawmakers to approve newly GOP-drawn congressional maps. And it seems, Mo, is how he pressures people. He names them because he knows that when he names people, right, out come the flying monkeys to threaten and harass and condemn. In a Truth Social post Wednesday night, Trump said Senate Republican leaders, and he named them, won't be in politics for long if they don't do what's necessary to save our country. The president said unless the redrawn maps are approved, Republicans will lose everything to Democrats. That's a big statement. Why? Why does it take redrawing? Unless, I mean, would people wouldn't be switching to vote for someone else if the Republicans were doing a great job, right?
Let me jump in here and say that historically, the Republican Party, ever since the civil rights movement specifically, has sought to make voting more difficult. One, because they understood the demographic shift of the country and where people, minorities, immigrants were more likely to register with the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party has, for the better part of 40 to 50 years, fought against that. They've tried to deconstruct, and they've been successful in many ways, deconstructing the Voting Rights Act, the type of voter suppression techniques that they've used in states like Georgia, where you're not allowed to give someone water, or they'll limit the number of polling places which are available. So people honestly have to wait in line to vote 6 hours or more because their polling location is the only one in a given county. Or you'll have it where people will be removed from voting rolls because they haven't, quote unquote, voted in the past 2 elections or something. It's a right, and they want to remove it because they're trying to make it more difficult for you to vote. Even in the best of presidential elections, we may have 40% of voters turn out. So it's not about having so many people vote that we can't keep track of who is legally voting. The Republican Party doesn't want you to vote because if everyone can vote, and I'm talking about legally vote, they lose. It is a numbers game. I'm sorry, Kim, please continue.
No, that's good. President said anyone who votes against redistricting will be met with a MAGA primary in the spring. So more threats coming. The Trump administration says it is creating a militarized zone at the US-Mexico border in California. What did we turn into, Korea? The Interior Department says about 760 acres of public lands are being transferred to the U.S. Navy to support ongoing border security operations in a new zone that will stretch from the Arizona border to the mountains near San Diego. A measles outbreak is spreading in South Carolina. The State Department is reporting 27 new cases of the virus since last Friday. 27 since last Friday. About one.
Let me guess. South Carolina probably is one of the largest anti-vax states, probably the lowest vaccination rate states. Probably. I can't confirm that.
But I think you're right. I think you're right on the money. Again, Mo Kelly, about 111 cases have been reported in a northwest part of the state, South Carolina, that includes Spartanburg, where the vaccination rate for students is below the 95% rate that doctors say is required to protect against outbreaks.
There it is.
Yeah. There's so no reason for this to happen. We have vaccines to prevent against this. 111 cases reported in South Carolina. People suffering needlessly.
We had a couple people, I think in Texas and California, die because of measles. It is 100% preventable. No one needs to die from measles. It was effectively eradicated back in 2000. And we're back to this. And this is a direct result of the anti-vax movement, the anti-science and pro-ignorance movement. People unnecessarily suffering. And most people don't know the mortality rate is not necessarily high with measles, but the complications and the long-term effects of measles is not often highlighted. But people think, well, if this doesn't have a high mortality rate, then we can just stick it out like chickenpox or something.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work that way.
Pro-ignorance movement. You just said that. I think that I'll be using that more often. New York City mayor-elect
in this country, 30 to 35% idiots.
Thank you, Jim Avila.
It's actually higher than that.
Yeah. He did say he would revise that upward. New York City Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani is defending his Know Your Rights video, advising migrants on what to do if approached by ICE agents. During a recent interview with MS Now, Mamdani dismissed criticism by saying he can't think of a more American thing to do than speak about the protections that we all have under the law. His video sparked pushback from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who suggested Mamdani was advising migrants on how to evade the law. Nah, he said protect your rights. That's different, right? I don't know.
It is to a reasonable person.
Speaking of immigration, a federal judge is ordering Kilmar Abrego Garcia to be released immediately from ICE custody. Boy, this has been going on forever. Abrego Garcia, who Homeland Security says is a quote, illegal immigrant and gang member, has been fighting deportation attempts for months, becoming a focal point of Trump's immigration crackdown. A federal judge says Abrego Garcia has been held without lawful authority. The government had been wanting a ban to be lifted on sending Abrego Garcia to Liberia. His lawyers have claimed Liberia would eventually send him back to his home country of El Salvador, where he faces gang violence. So, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene rejecting President Trump's A-plus rating of the economy. During a recent interview, Greene said, "You cannot gaslight people and tell them their bills are affordable." She said, "It's insulting to people's intelligence." The Georgia Republicans citing high electric bills and grocery prices when pushing back on the positive grade, while highlighting that Trump is a billionaire president of the United States who she said doesn't even go to the grocery store. The GOP activist known as the My Pillow guy, he's running for governor. My Pillow CEO Mike Lindell announcing he's running for Minnesota governor, joining a crowded Republican field to challenge Democratic incumbent Governor Tim Walz. By the way, Lindell was found to have defamed a former Dominion voting system employee over accusations regarding the 2020 presidential election. So I don't know about his track record there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is declaring a font, you know, the kind of thing you use to write up memos and such. It's called the Calibri font. He says it's DEI.
No way. You're kidding.
Yeah. Rubio is ordering the State Department to return to using New Times Roman as the standard font for official communications, because God forbid we should help anyone who has a learning disability or sight disability from being able to read the information that you're trying to put out to the public.
No sans serif, no Helvetica, only Times Roman.
What? Only New Times Roman. The font was switched to the sans serif Calibri under the Biden administration based on studies that particular font might be easier to read for some people with visual disabilities. An internal memo calls the use of Calibri a wasteful diversity program, and it says New Times Roman will restore decorum and professionalism.
A font.
A font.
DEI.
Day, sir.
Paramount CEO David Ellison says he is not giving up on his quest to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. This after one of his financial backers dropped out of the hostile takeover bid. Tencent Holdings is a Chinese company, and its participation had the potential to stall approval over the national security concerns. Ellison is also getting major financial support from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia pays cash, and other Middle Eastern nations, but he insists Paramount's offer is better than the offer from Netflix that was already accepted by the board at Warner Discovery. Ellison is asking shareholders now to override the board's decision. And just a couple more stories, as I know David Katz has arrived. Time magazine is naming the architects of AI as the person of the year. Time's editor-in-chief said this year, no one had greater impact on the individuals who imagined, designed, and built AI. One of two special covers features an illustration of a group of AI executives sitting on a beam that recalls the famous lunch atop a skyscraper photo. And lastly, I don't know if you're a big lottery player, my friend, but the Powerball jackpot is now worth $1 billion. Nobody matched all 6 numbers in last night's drawing. And so now the grand prize rolls over to Saturday's drawing when a $2 Powerball ticket could be worth $1 billion. Whoever wins, if anybody wins, can choose the entire amount over 30 installments or take a one-time cash amount of $460 million. That's quite a difference from $1 billion. $460 for the cash payout.
I want the cash payout so I can put it in the bank or whatever, get the interest and be done with it. I may be dead in 2 years, get hit by a bus. I don't want to wait 30 years. I can't guarantee I'm going to be here in 30 years, Kim. I can't.
Give me the money and give it to me now.
That's right. And then I can go home Mackenzie Bezos and donate and be a philanthropist and do all the things I want to do.
Give me the tea and give me the tea now. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It is the best coffee and the best tea you will have in your life. So good. They've got the holiday coffee blend on the website. They have holiday gift sets. I just have my vanilla tea that I had a sip of during the newscast when Mo was talking, and it renewed me and gave me a new sense of ability to speak. I love it so much. Check it out, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. They have very good and accurate tasting notes on the website, so you know exactly what you're getting. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And if you do end up with something in the cart, please use the checkout code MARKT, no spaces there, MARKT. That'll save you 10% off your order, and it's great to put a little Coachella Valley coffee or tea in the holiday stocking. So check it out, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
Feel it in your soul. The Mark Thompson Show.
And now let's get to former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney and commentator and contributor for The Mark Thompson Show, David Katz, who joins us. David, it is great to have you back. I didn't know I was again, but it's great to see you, my friend.
With you, can you see me fine? I had a little problem last week, but I'm coming in loud and clear, and you can see me straight on.
Yeah.
Good, great.
Now, here's where I wanted to start. I wanted your professional opinion about this. We are inundated with so many huge stories. We have what's going on off the coast of Venezuela. We have what's going on here in America with ICE and their ICE raids. We have the New York judge who's ordered the release of the Jeffrey Epstein grand jury records, and we're waiting for the imminent release of the totality of the Jeffrey Epstein records. If you were to point someone saying, hey, this is the story or the controversy that you should be most focused on, what would you say?
Well, I'm a legal commentator, and the U.S. Supreme Court hasn't done anything. There's some things on the horizon that I'm not happy about, but nothing major is happening right now. So I think really one of the big stories is Venezuela, that we're really on the verge of war. I think seizing that ship is virtually an act of war, that tanker, as well as all the other things that we've done down there. It has not been presented to Congress in any way, shape, or form. There's been no declaration of war. There's been no resolution like the Gulf of Tonkin resolution during the Vietnam conflict. there's just been a total absence of participation by Congress. And we're sending troops, we're rappelling into their ship, we're seizing this ship off the coast. It looks like we may be planning some kind of CIA covert action, to try to take out Maduro. I mean, let's not be too beat around the bush. They're going to try to kill him down there with American secret forces in his home country without a declaration of war. So I think all of that is extremely troubling, and it just doesn't seem like there's much stopping it. I think we're going to have the whole world, including some very civilized countries, some countries that we think of as having the rule of law, some countries that are allies and we care about their opinions, just furious at us because there's also the incident of killing the two shipwrecked survivors, basically knowing that we were just either murdering them, since there have not been, as I say, a declaration of war, any participation by Congress. So that would be just murder by the poor soldiers who are being asked to carry out that unlawful order in violation of international law and the rule of law, and it's pretty obvious. Or it's going to be just a war crime, because if somehow you can construe what we've done as being in a state of war. So they're putting these soldiers in a terrible situation. They're putting intelligence officers in a terrible situation because they have to go to counsel as prudently as they can without getting fired themselves or demoted, and ask them, is this a violation of the law of war? And I think everybody knows, even before they get the opinion, we know that from war movies and just common sense, that you can't murder or kill fallen soldiers, defenseless soldiers on the battlefield, and you can't do it with two poor sailors who are hanging on for dear life. You should rescue them, not execute them.
I don't know if you were listening at the beginning of the show, David, but you basically said a lot of things that I said, as far as I believe that the seizing of the tanker was an act of war. And we were on this mission creep in the sense of a further escalation almost day by day. You brought up something that I didn't necessarily verbalize as far as regime change and the removal of Nicolas Maduro. But I did say, if we know our American history, that is something that we are known to do. We could talk about Castro in Cuba. We could the Bay of Pigs. We can talk about the installing of the Shah of Iran. We do this. We could talk about the killing of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. But beyond the regime change, what do you think might be the goal? We get out Maduro so we get control of the oil, or how might this play out?
Well, this is, of course, the notorious gunboat diplomacy that goes back well over 100 years in Latin America. This is the Monroe Doctrine, kind of on steroids under some of the people that we've had in power. Teddy Roosevelt, he had his good qualities, but, when they wouldn't, Colombia wouldn't give us the land and the use of it to make the Panama Canal, we fomented a coup, a revolution. Suddenly Panama was independent. Suddenly they signed where Colombia wouldn't, that we could build this canal across Panama, and all the countries that we've destabilized down there. Mo, when I was an undergraduate, I was actually in Latin American studies. I was getting a master's in that before I went to law school, and I speak Spanish fluently, and I'm really followed what happened. It's hard for people to believe that in the 70s, there were almost all military dictatorships down there, supported by us. There was the horrible role that Kissinger and Nixon played in the coup in Chile against Pinochet. Argentina was a military dictatorship, country after country. And the irony was that Venezuela was the rich democratic country in Latin America. And I worked there as a translator in the summer of 1977 in Caracas. So, of course, it's horrifying for me to see just what's befallen Venezuela. And it's not all the United States' fault. Chavez came to power. He was popular. Then he was succeeded by Maduro, who was unpopular, who's a thug and not somebody that I would ever have voted for. Guess what? The Venezuelans didn't vote for him. He spectacularly lost the last election, and he just wouldn't concede defeat. And he has his armed groups all over. It's a terrible country to live. Millions, literally millions of people have left what used to be a rich country, Mo, and gone to Colombia, if they'll take them, tried to come to the United States. A lot of these migrants here now are Venezuelans who've lost everything, including lost hope of having a functioning democracy. So Maduro is a really bad guy. But then you have Trump saying things like Colombia is next. Colombia is next for this kind of destabilization. I mean, that is a democratically elected president in a fair election down there in Colombia. So it's a terrible situation. You tell me what I think is next. I think they really are going to try to assassinate Maduro in his own country. He sleeps in different places, prudently to save his own life. But that's terrible that we're playing that kind of a role. And yes, I think if he could be driven from office, then what he wants is for his top aides to run the country pretty much the way he's running it. We may yet go for something like that. And yes, I think a lot of it is to grab the oil from Venezuela, which, economically is a very fraught issue because put aside all the international law, put aside that you can't steal resources from other nations, put all of that aside. Who knows what would happen to the oil price if we actually tried to do that? We might glut the market because right now, Venezuela, with the sanctions, has had a lot of trouble producing oil, but it shouldn't. They have the largest reserve of petroleum in the world. I'll say that again, more than Saudi Arabia. They have the largest reserve of oil in the world. They're a key member of OPEC. And when they're really producing a lot of oil, guess what? It sends the world oil price down, which the United States is kind of dependent on a fairly high oil price for the last at least a few years.
Un día, en el futuro, si quieres, tenemos que hablar en español solamente. Si quieres. ¿Está bien?
Mucho. Y podemos tener una traducción en inglés para para su público, para sus aficionados, Mo.
Sí. I'm just having a little fun with you, David Katz. For those that know, I wouldn't say I'm fluent, but I'm just about fluent. But I think that's a good transition point. As David, did I lose you?
Mark, by the way. I learned Spanish young, but that's, of course, one of the hardest things is to, have good pronunciation in a foreign language.
Well, with me, I watch television, estoy mirando televisión, escuchando la radio todos los días y ayúdame la lengua. Tenemos que practicar más practicando mi español. Yo creo que es la verdad.
Well, I'm married, but do you have a Spanish-speaking girlfriend? Because that's never a bad idea if you want to improve your language abilities.
I just try to take it in wherever I can, and hearing the language, not reading it in a book, is the way you learn it. And there's a point to this. I was speaking in Spanish because when I went to Spain and stayed there for a few weeks, and if you've ever been to Spain, the co-national language is Spanish and Catalan. You're not going to hear English unless you're in the high tourist areas. I say that to say, go to a foreign country and be forced to learn the language, and you have a better appreciation and understanding of immigration, and will have a better appreciation of those who come to this country looking for a better life. So I ask you, what do you make of this immigration fight right about now in a legal sense? We know that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was just released, but we don't know what the future is going to hold for him. What do you make of this immigration fight right about now in a legal sense?
Well, there's two major kinds of immigration. One is the highly skilled workers who get the visas. Just to tell from my own personal experience, my mom passed away at 92 2 years ago, and just batteries of doctors saved her life at various points, and they were almost all born outside the United States. They came from the Indian subcontinent, they'd come from Latin America, they'd come from various places around the world. They came here, the most talented people in the world, the so-called brain drain. We were the beneficiary. All these people coming here. Our universities are the pride of the world unless Trump screws them up, but I don't think he'll have long enough in office to screw up our great universities. So they attract these tremendously bright energetic people from all over the world who get these degrees, and then they have to try to stay here. They usually want to stay here, many of them. Some go back to their countries and make huge contributions, but many of them want to stay here, and we encourage them to stay here. Trump is even against that kind of immigration, which is remarkable. That's something you expect a traditional Republican to be for.
Right.
It somewhat drives down American wages of competitors. It helps our country greatly. It's something that you would think any sensible Republican, any sensible person who'd like to have quality medical care, great engineering ability, come and stay in the United States would be for. Trump is such a know-nothing that he and many of his officials are even against that. Then, of course, there's the other kind of immigration that, was what they show at the border, which was the millions of people who came here under Biden. And many people think that Biden should have controlled that more. He should have controlled the border more. And, I would just say the proof of that was that in the last year, 15 months of his administration, when he realized how unpopular that had become, fair or unfair, there was this view that a lot of moderate voters, swing voters, had that the country was being inundated, that this was out of proportion, that it was unsustainable, that New York City and Denver weren't getting enough money to cover it. And so those cities, which were liberal and open, and embracing immigrants, even they were against it because there was no money to match up this huge number of people that they then had to support all of a sudden. It seems like Biden and his administration was able to control it after they couldn't get the votes in the Congress. I mean, let's be honest. It looks like suddenly the last year he was able to control it, he and his administration. And of course, Trump, with all of his threats and the ugly things that he does, Trump would say, you see, you have to be ugly in this area. You have to be merciless in this area. I don't agree with that. But the truth is that this feeling that the border is being inundated, that there's no control over the borders, has been achieved by Trump. It's probably about the only thing he remains popular on. The people who voted for him for the economy think, oh my God, I got hornswoggled by this, by this Trump. The people who want the economy to improve, the people who don't want us engaged in foreign adventures, all of them feel frustrated they voted for Trump. So about the only thing he stayed popular on is he has decreased, we have to say it, it's just a fact, he has decreased the number of people who come into the United States, cross the border illegally, or come here, get paroled into the United States and come here by the millions. Trump and his administration has, by being ugly and being a lot of other things, has stopped that. Now, when you get into the specifics of some of the immigration cases, Mo, they're just not following the law. And that's the thing with Abrego Garcia. They've shown a tendency, the Trump administration, to be very stupid and not follow the law. And I've said this with Mark for months. The courts have a lot of power, the federal courts. They have life tenure. They're going to be there long after Kristi Noem and Kash Patel are just, weird footnotes in history. These federal judges are all going to be there with their life tenure. So this was stupid fights that they picked. And I think, they're losing these fights. I know what you're going to say. Some of these cases are going to get to the Supreme Court. And despite the lawfulness of the judges' rulings, we're worried that the U.S. Supreme Court, packed by Trump and packed with 6 Republicans, is going to do the wrong thing on the law. And they will in some cases, and they won't in other cases. But generally speaking, Trump's cases have been a disaster. And Exhibit A is the Abrego Garcia, which, if it weren't a human being's life and the impact that it has on the populace and people being so afraid, immigrants being so afraid, this would be high farce. This would be a Saturday Night Live routine. Planes are coming, planes are going. He's in this awful prison. They can't get him out. Then, oh my God, they can get him out. Then they're going to prosecute him for being an alien smuggler. Then he's not an alien smuggler. Then nobody's pursuing the case from the Trump administration. And now this latest thing that he can't be deported to Costa Rica, that Costa Rica stands up and says, we don't know anything about it. He's welcome to come here. And then they want to send him to Africa. Why do they want to send a guy who's only lived in Latin America and in a Latin community here? Why do they want to send him to deepest Africa? Again, that's just another sort of racist trope from the Trump administration.
But here's something alongside. We know that the Trump administration has been getting it at court. Beyond Kumar Garcia, we know the Trump administration in its deployment of the National Guard here in L.A. We've seen that time and time again, that at least on the National Guard issue, the Trump administration has been losing. But also, to your point, since it's winning in the narrative debate of decreasing illegal immigration, here's the question. I don't think the Trump administration cares that they're losing in court as long as it's playing well with MAGA. Would you agree?
Yeah, Mo, I think that's a very good point, that it's performative. And like, you take the ruling that this judge, Judge Breyer up in San Francisco, he's, by the way, the brother of the US Supreme Court Justice who stood down and stepped aside, and Jackson, his former, took Justice Breyer's place. Well, this is Justice Breyer's brother, who's a sitting district judge, and he ended up having the case, even though he's in the San Francisco Bay Area, of the the sort of this invasion that Trump had down here in LA. This is another thing that would be a matter of farce, except they've terrorized Hispanic community down here, even people who are legally in the country. They've terrorized the Hispanic population down here to the point that it's affecting our industry. It's affecting businesses, small businesses. A lot of them, people voted for Trump because they thought, oh, we're going to have a businessman in there and prices are going to go down. And these people are ruining the day. These small business people down here, many of them are Hispanics because they've lost their businesses. Everything's gone to hell in a handbasket. Hispanics are afraid to come out and go to work. So it's had this huge impact on our economy down here. And of course, the fear was that these troops were coming here. And then, of course, there's the other fear that, we've gotten just sort of, we're getting immune to having troops in the streets, something we weren't immune to. And people think, well, that's by design by Trump, because what he wants is he wants it to become normal, to normalize having troops in the streets. So then when the elections come around, we won't be so shocked to have troops in the streets, and those troops will be in the streets then to cut down on the vote, to intimidate Hispanics and other people from voting. And so it was all of a corrupt, power grabbing piece by Trump. Well, he's gotten nowhere with the courts. And now the judge has ordered, after hearing all the evidence, has ordered Trump to get those Marines out of LA. They shouldn't have been here in the first place. Trump's argument is that as long as they lawfully came here, and there's, that's back and forth whether they were lawfully brought here, but that once the troops are lawfully brought someplace, he can keep them forever. So he can get this camel can get his nose in the door, and then we have a standing army of military force, National Guard, federalized by Trump, staring us in the face. Anyway, the judge said, no, you cannot do that. And I think that ruling will be affirmed. I think that ruling will be resounding around the country. And I think that this is one, it's almost like, I think that this is one of those that the moment will pass, that Trump did not get away with this, and that Chicago, New Orleans, some of these other cities will follow the lead of this very learned judge up in the San Francisco Bay Area and say, no, this violates the posse comitatus, that at most the federal troops can be brought in to protect federal buildings. The federal buildings don't need a lot of troops to be protected. They also have a federal protective service. They have the FBI. They have other people who can protect the buildings. This was really unnecessary. This was just a made up thing by Trump. They're not needed to protect the buildings. And a crucial thing to understand is that you cannot send federal troops under the law to go around and protect federal workers. The ICE, whatever else you can say about them, are domestic federal workers. If this were good law, Mo, then when the Democrats get back in power, there are so many tax cheats down in Texas and in these red states, they could send the IRS with federal troops to back up every IRS agent who is doing their audit. Because, you run into a lot of difficult situations, just like ICE does. So are the Republicans ready for that? They're ready for that, for that being the law of the land, that the IRS could go around and do their audits and other activities in Texas and the other red states, backed up by federal troops, right at their side, these IRS agents.
David Katz, I'm good time with you. I want to end with this. We made mention of the Supreme Court, but we really didn't delve into the Supreme Court. I'm hearing that the Supreme Court will likely allow the president to expand his power, firing federal employees who heretofore were not under the purview or jurisdiction of the Trump administration. And we know that there might be a decision on birthright citizenship. My question is kind of open-ended. Where do you think the SCOTUS is going to figure in to what's going to happen in this country in the next month or so?
On birthright citizenship, just last night, I heard some people who are, not lawyers, but they're pretty well advised about current events. And they were really scared and said, oh my God, Trump is taking birthright citizenship to the US Supreme Court. And I said, he's making a big mistake because the Supreme Court will rule against him on that. The Constitution, the 14th Amendment is very clear that someone born in the United States is a citizen, becomes a citizen. And they said, oh my God, but what if one of the parents or grandparents is undocumented? And I said, again, there's a precedent from over 100 years ago. It involves somebody who was of Chinese, ethnically Chinese, but born in the United States. Two parents who weren't citizens. The Supreme Court ruled that that person was a citizen. The Supreme Court's going to rule that all these folks here, if they were born in the United States, doesn't matter what their parents' status was, they are citizens. And so Trump, again, that was performative mode, just like you said. The more Machiavellian, devious thing would have been to not take it to the U.S. Supreme Court, where Trump will certainly lose, but to just make trouble. But he didn't go that route because he wanted to perform and bring this up for MAGA. And so he'll just lose and it'll be clear. The Machiavellian thing would have been to fool around with birth certificates, right? Make people's lives difficult, but never get a definitive ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court. He didn't do that. When you come to firing all these federal workers, the workers that are most important are these ones on the commissions. And that's that woman from the Federal Trade Commission. Her name is Slaughter. And that case just came up, Trump v. Slaughter, and the oral argument was very disappointing because all 6 of the conservatives asked questions that made it clear that they are going to allow, unfortunately, this commissioner to be removed. And, what goes around comes around, but it's just not a good situation that, okay, the remedy will be that when a Democrat becomes president, these boards, which often are like 3 members from one party and 2 members from another party, that the Democratic president can then fire the Republican members of the board. This is not where the nation ought to be going at all. This is not only not compelled by the Constitution, but it's certainly not good government. You want people on the Environmental Protection Agency, on the Federal Trade Commission, on a lot of these other commissions, the Election Commission, you want them to be experts in that field. I'm smart, Mo, you're smart, Kim is smart. We have our political opinions, philosophical opinions. We're not ready to be commissioners on the EPA or the FTC, the FDA. You need people with expertise in those fields. And the idea that every president comes along and just puts a bunch of hacks in there, that is not the way to go. But it looks like that's the way this U.S. Supreme Court's going to go. And then we're looking forward in the next couple of weeks to the tariffs decision. And I do think that they will strike down the tariffs and require the disgorgement of the money to the importers. How we consumers get the money from the importers, that's going to be one of the interesting ones. We probably really won't. Sometimes we may with class actions or with rebates or something like that. So the Supreme Court, I'm not as pessimistic about the Supreme Court. There are some people who just say they're a rubber stamp. They're totally in the pocket of Trump. I don't think that's true. But the way they were going to approach this Voting Rights Act case, that one's a little scary. So you always have to be really concerned for our civil rights and also for precedent. In this case, one last thing I want to say, this case with the getting rid of commissioners and this unitary executive and the idea that the president has this enormous king-like power. This is not the way this country has gone. I mentioned this the other day on a different station. George Washington set up a commission. If you think the framers, these Supreme Court justices who claim they're originalists, they're always saying we're doing what the framers wanted. Well, here's an example of what the framers actually wanted. Washington set up a commission to pay the Revolutionary War debt. He put the Chief Justice on that commission, and he put the Vice President on the commission. Neither one of those people could be removed at will, not the Vice President, not the Chief Justice of the United States. Why was it okay with Washington to give up that power to the commission to have commissioners who were not removable by the president? And then you had also Hamilton and Jefferson sat on that commission. So the framers knew very well that the president could delegate power and it wasn't a violation of the separation of powers. And then 100 years ago, we had this famous case called Humphrey's Executor, and the Chief Justice Roberts, who I like on some issues, don't like on a lot of other issues, he said, Humphrey's Executor is a dry husk of what we thought it was. That's no precedent at all. Mo, let me say this one very last thing. That's not any protection of our constitutional liberties. You know, the government cannot take your property without compensation. And every right winger, Republican, business person hearing my voice will say, hooray, yes, you bet the government can't take your property without due compensation. That's right in the Constitution. Well, you want some liberal justices to come along and say, that's a dry husk. Oh, that principle's just a dry husk. We have precedents in the Supreme Court jurisprudence. We don't have dry husks because somebody politically would like them to be a dry husk. So always worried about the U.S. Supreme Court, but birthright citizenship, and I think the tariffs are going to come out okay.
David Katz, former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney. You've seen both sides of the law. That's why you're so good at what you do. We appreciate you coming on, and I'm serious. Serio. Tengo que hablar en español. Juntos.
Órale. Lo más pronto posible. But we have to have translation at the bottom. Come on, like foreign films. Otherwise, we'll turn people off. We'll turn people off if we're speaking a language they're not understanding or having transcribed at the bottom of the screen.
I can't wait to do this with you again. I don't know when, but David Katz, I always enjoy talking to you. Be well, my friend.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, Kim, you're on deck. So the next time we speak, it'll be in Spanish, and we'll need you to transcribe. We'll have maybe a Google Translate.
You know, it's interesting. I understand Spanish, but I have a hard time speaking it super fast. And Mark says this as well. And he'll say that he has such a great accent that when he speaks Spanish, people start speaking back to him as if he's fluent. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait a minute. So, yeah.
There are a few people in the chat who made mention of when I went to Spain and could understand what I was talking about. And this highlights it. The first time I went to Spain, I'm thinking that there would be more English there than there was. And there's not a lot of people speaking English because there's no reason to speak it unless you're at a restaurant or a hotel. But what it taught me is book Spanish is good for your pronunciation, for your conjugation and your diction, and it works real well in Spain. But most of the time, book Spanish doesn't teach you how to respond in a very conversational way. What I mean by that is, and I tell the story all the time because it's so true, you don't learn all the idioms. You don't learn how to just talk to someone. And I remember I was asking when I was in Spain, I was in Barcelona, and I was asking where the ATM is. In other words, I needed to get some money. And I was saying, ¿Dónde está ATM? You know, and I said, in a English idiom sense, where is the ATM? And I should have asked, where is, ¿Dónde está máquina de dinero, the cash machine? Because in Barcelona, the ATM, the ATM, those letters, is what is used for the bus, what we would call the MTA.
You got sent to the bus station.
Asking where was the bus stop?
Yeah.
And I got the answer to the question I asked. And I ended up at a bus stop. Where's the cash machine? I say that to say, once you travel, and especially if you travel to a country which is not your birth language,
sure,
you learn very quickly how non-fluent you are, because you can think about the question you're going to ask. Like, for example, if I say, Kim, you know, how do I get to your house? Well, okay, you're going to go down the street, you're going to make a right at the corner, you're going to look at the stop sign. If you see a Taco Bell on your left, you're going in the right direction. People you don't learn necessarily how to deal with the organic aspect of language. And that was hard for me, even though I understood a lot of what people were saying, but I could not respond at the same rate.
Yeah, it's true. What's interesting is when I was in Europe, the difference in language between the difference in the importance of learning other languages between the United States and Europe is shocking. I was talking to a street artist who was selling these beautiful pictures and had them all laid on a blanket. And he started speaking to me in German. And I kind of shook my head. And then he started in French. And I went, no French. And then he started in, I don't know, some other language, all before he got to English. This guy is someone selling art on the street speaks at minimum 4 languages. He has to, probably, because he's speaking with tourists every day and this is his livelihood. But I mean, find an American who speaks 4 languages fluently and can just switch between them like nothing. It's amazing. And he wasn't the only one.
We live in a country where education has been devalued. We live in a country where we look at speaking any language other than English is some way an affront to American sensibilities and part of a larger invasion of other cultures, where if you grew up in Europe, you would speak at least 3 languages. Your birth language, you'd have to learn 1 or 2 other languages in the course of school. I wish it was like that here. And I can get by on Spanish, but when I was most recently in Italy this past summer, my Italian is not very good, but my knowledge of Spanish was the meeting point for a lot of people in not only Italy, but when I was in Greece, because everyone speaks 2 or 3 languages.
Right.
And we would meet in the middle with Spanish, because usually that was their second or third language, not necessarily English. Now, some schools, from what I'm told, they have to learn English, but I have found in my international travel, and I would love to hear what people in the chat have to say about this, I am always treated better when I make the overture to speak in the language there. And in Spain, I loved it because there are many people who are from the UK who did not speak any Spanish, and they were determined just to use English. And I could tell that I was receiving preferential treatment because I was not the typical ugly American who, and they knew I wasn't fluent, but they also knew that I respected the culture. When I was in Korea 2 summers ago, my Korean is very limited. But if you greet someone like "Annyeonghaseyo," you're acknowledging that you understand the culture and how to speak to an elder, or the formality of the first greeting, or you should just say thank you. It's like "감사합니다." They understand that you're not fluent, but you also have respect for the culture.
Right.
We don't have basic respect for cultures other than our own here in the United States. And unfortunately, this administration is leaning into that. When you say America first, it means F everything and everyone else.
What's interesting, I have a daughter who's a junior in high school, and she has to take, in order to graduate, 2 years of a foreign language. But the way that we present it to kids, I think, is you have to do this as a requirement. And so they get through it and then they forget it and they don't really ever speak it, right? It happened to me with Spanish. I actually took 4 years of Spanish in high school. And so I have a knowledge of it, but because I don't use it every day, it just kind of fades away. And I think the emphasis on, using that as a skill and being proud of the languages you speak maybe is a different way of presenting it, so that people in other parts of the world learn a language, embrace it, carry it through and use it throughout their lifetimes. Whereas in America, we suffer through the 2 years that, we're required, and then out it goes.
If you live in Europe, presumably you could drive an hour and you'll be in a different country.
Sure.
You could be on the train, be on a bullet train, and you'll be in a different country before the afternoon. And so I understand the utilization of other languages, it's easier. Now, being in California, I can presumably use my Spanish every single day. There are days when I was driving to work where I would only listen to Spanish radio. I would listen to the Laker games on their Spanish station, 1330 AM, and that helped me, because the only way you can effectively learn a language is to repeatedly hear the language. And the reason I'm talking about this is this idea of American exceptionalism is not that. It's an individualism and this America first idea where anything not quote unquote American in its origin is to be devalued. And if you buy into that, then you buy into the mistreatment of Hispanics and Latinos. You buy into the mistreatment of Somali people. All of it works together. That's why this pro-ignorance movement, as I dubbed it, has had such a footing, gained such a footing, and has been so successful for Donald Trump, because it requires nothing. It requires no knowledge. It requires zero empathy. It requires absolutely no education, civility, none of that. And if it caters to our worst angels, and if that resonates with you, then anything which is indicative of civility, in other words, you're not going to be bothered by the treatment of the female reporters by Donald Trump. You're not going to be bothered by the invective spewed by the president as he talks about Black and brown communities here domestically and countries, whole countries internationally. If you are not in any way moved by education, by civility, by the appreciation for other cultures and other languages, then MAGA is perfect for you. It's absolutely perfect because it requires nothing of you. It doesn't require you to be smart. It doesn't require you to be civil. It doesn't require you to be a good person. It requires nothing. And when you require nothing of people, that can be very comfortable and very inviting. You know, because a lot of MAGA, they will never go to a Spanish-speaking country and know the feeling of being lost in a place where you don't speak the language. Travel changes you. Yeah. Go to a foreign country where you don't speak the language, you will come back with a better understanding and appreciation of the struggles of other people who've picked up their whole life and moved to America for the chance of a better life. And also this, if you were to move to a foreign country, you most likely are going to move to an enclave where your language is spoken. You would get that because there's a level of comfort. There's a level of community there. And so when other people do it coming here and form their own conclaves, be it a Chinatown or a little Tokyo or a little Italy, or if it happens to be a Muslim Islamic community or Arab community or Armenian, it will not be threatening to you. You will understand it. You will actually appreciate it, and you will better love thy neighbor.
Agree.
I think.
Yeah, completely agree. I found that I've only been abroad once. And when I went, I found myself more invested even in just news stories that once I got home, I thought, oh, I know that place. I've been there, or I could picture that, you know, that city or the country. And so when, you know, there was massive flooding in Belgium, I thought, oh, I, you know, drove along those streets. You become more empathetic, more invested because you've been there, you've you know, walked amongst those people.
When I was in Barcelona, I've been there a couple times, and I don't know if you remember when they had the terrorist attack in Barcelona in Las Ramblas, where this guy was driving down the street, whatever, and was killing people indiscriminately. I said, I walked those streets. Yeah. I know some of those shops. I met presumably some of those people. Mm-hmm. Travel changes you. It doesn't seem, to your point, like some faraway land or some people that you're not connected to. You know, if something were to happen in France or in Rome and Italy, it's like, I've been there. I've been to the Vatican. I know what that is like. Or if they're discussing an issue specific to certain regions, I can say, yes, I better understand it. Or like, for example, if you haven't been following what has been going on in Spain with the ongoing fight as far as between the use of Spanish or Catalan or how the Catalonian people are being subjugated, I have a better appreciation of them because I've been there and I've seen it up close. Or if you're wondering about the fight against immigration in Italy and the concerns of the people, of the Italians there, I've been there, I've seen it, I better understand it, and I can appreciate what is being debated. But here, we just love ignorance. We love ignorance. I mean, it's like we created a Department of War and stripped the Department of Education within 2 months of each other. What does that tell you?
Tells me exactly what I need to know, Mo. That we value, you know, being strong, being being the bully, but we don't value knowing things and learning things.
But I can say, as we come to the end of this show, is once again, I'm humbled and appreciative. I'm looking at all the people in the chat. I appreciate you continue to not only contribute financially to the show, you also you subscribe, you share, you participate in the show. And that's the only way all this can work. It's not just to watch. It's not just to listen if you just happen to be in the car. You're actually involving yourselves in helping propel the show in many ways, and we appreciate you. Kim, go ahead and let's shout out some of the people who've been helping contribute.
Well, I have a new one from Luis, who pops in $4.99, I think. $5. Yeah, Louis. There's Louise. Props to Haley Stevens from Michigan for formally filing articles of impeachment against ignorance's favorite son, RFK Jr. I don't know if this is going anywhere, but at least somebody is doing something. And Luis is one of the many contributors to the show. I think he's thrown in at least 15 today with different comments to read. So thank you.
But I'm humbled, and I know Mark Thompson, who's probably watching or listening, or I know he does at least watch the show after the fact. And he usually send me notes. I know he is appreciative. That's why I bring that up. And again, I'm appreciative to you, Albert, who's behind the scenes at the moment. And you, Kim, you've been so instrumental in helping me in this endeavor because, without Mark, obviously I would not be here. So I do not take it for granted, nor do I take it lightly.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to get to have you one more day. We get to have you on Friday, and we have so many great things coming up tomorrow, including Friday Fabulous Florida. We'll be here for that. This Week in Politics features Michael Schur and Mo Kelly this week, so that's exciting. And then Michael Snyder, the Culture Blaster, will come in with movie reviews. Friday on the way in, Mo.
Until then, bye-bye.
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
All the time. Bye-bye.